Oh, hello, I'm Blackbright, as you know, and I've been doing a series of Luton influences, and I hope you've been enjoying them so far. Today I have with me Pastor Lloyd Denny, and he is, in my opinion, very influential. He is a senior minister and general secretary of the Restoration Revival Fellowship, in brackets, Restoration Church of God, based in Bury Park in Luton. So I understand you have been or still are the Deputy Lord Lieutenant of Bedfordshire. Is that correct?
I am.
Okay. And what does that mean, and what does that evolve, and what do you need to do to acquire that title?
Right. Well, thank you for the invitation to join you today. And thank you for the compliment of being asked to be part of what you're doing. You describe me as an influencer. I'm happy with that because I do seek to influence people in the right way. But back to your question. As a deputy, the British pronounce it lieutenant, I'm afraid, not like the Americans who say lieutenant.
Oh, okay.
So if you're in the right circle and you say lieutenant, there will be a scans at you.
Okay.
You gotta say it right. So it's lieutenant. It's one of those quirky English way of pronouncing certain words.
Okay.
So deputy lieutenant, the monarch at the moment, or a queen, in each county has a lord lieutenant. And their job is to basically carry out duties on behalf of Her Majesty in the county. In our case, Bedfordshire.
Mm-hmm.
We have a Lord Lieutenant. But each Lord Lieutenant then has a bunch of deputies that is appointed to support the Lord Lieutenant because, you can imagine the amount of work that could be involved because so many people are asking for visits by the Lord Lieutenants because of his connection to the royal family, the monarchy. And so they have many invitations from, anything charitable, anything civic, anything ceremonial. They want a representative to come along.
How much time does that take of your time?
It depends. At the moment, a lot of it is not as much because of the lockdown. But our complement for our size of county is around 30 or so deputies with one lieutenant, Lord Lieutenant. And so between us all, we share the work. And the Lord Lieutenant may ask us to do certain things. I tend to do a lot of the religious kinds because I'm a pastor. Mm-hmm. I'm inclined to be asked to do that.
Okay.
But I also do all sorts. I do the ceremonial to do it. People becoming citizenship.
Oh, really?
So things
that's
of that
interesting.
kind. So it varies. At the moment, because of the pandemic, it slowed down quite a bit. So we've had to do far less than we would have done normally.
Okay. And how long have you been chairman of Luton in Harmony? Are you still chairman?
I am indeed.
Oh, wow.
Over 10 years.
Okay.
In fact, it's 11 years next year.
And what do they do?
Well, Luton Harmony came about. I think you certainly would know because you're of the English Defence League.
But our viewers may not.
Yeah. But I know that. But the English Defence League began 10 or so years ago, birthed in Luton to our disappointment. A couple of Lutonians felt they were not being given the right kind of benefits, or their people, whoever that is, were not being given the right kind of benefits and profile and opportunities. And so they tried to stir it up a little bit. And they started it by saying, listen, we got to do something about it. It to attract all the nationalists and fascists and racists around the country, who then came linked up with them. In response, therefore, Luton Harmony began, and it was really to say to everyone else, listen, we are not going to give way to racism or disharmony. And so it began. And ever since we've been going, we saw them off, thankfully, because I think one of the major things about 6 years ago, when they were at the heights and they came into Luton, literally 15,000 or so, and we were working with the police at the time. The police had to get outsiders to help them Met West Midlands, all the police, because the numbers that were coming. And we said to the police at the time, we as a community, why don't we be the face of Bedfordshire, as opposed to the police themselves with the horses and many things that you'd imagine
It's
they would
less
have.
menacing, yeah.
Yeah. And they said, okay, so there we were in front of the horses and the battalion
Wow.
of police. And said, listen, so we then appealed to the crowds that came with their banners about citing all sort of things. And I said, listen, we are Lutonians. We don't want you here. Most of you are here from outsiders. How can you tell us what's right for us? And look at us. We're all from different backgrounds, and so we appealed to them. So it worked.
Wow.
It didn't work that they went away, but the police didn't have to do much because they didn't become hostile. They didn't turn it into a fight, which is what I think most of them were trying to stir up. Because prior to that, because we learned before that as a town, that prior to that, when they began their first moves, they decided to go into Borough Park itself and stirred up a lot of the young people. And, young people being young people, they resisted, they fought back. And over about 20, they went up in jail.
Wow.
Yeah, not the agitators,
but
the young people.
Yeah, the young
because
people.
they responded.
Yeah.
They knew how far to go. And we said to the community following it, listen, don't go down this road again. Don't let them provoke you and criminalizing your children, your young men.
It's so difficult for young people.
And it worked. And so because we were able to be the face of Luton, it then gave them nowhere to go. Because for starters, we didn't want them. Secondly, they weren't from Luton. Thirdly, we said we can look after ourselves. Thank you very much. And because we were a mix of people, community-wise, they couldn't accuse me of almost anything, really. As a black man, and as a black man who's a preacher, what's your problem? Yeah. And so in the end, it kind of petered out. And thankfully, they tried again a year after to see if they could reinvent themselves and call themselves Britain first this time. And then the numbers were a fraction of what it was before. And eventually they petered out. And some of their leaders got done for various criminal activities.
Okay. Oh, that's brilliant. So you're also president of Save Our Children International.
Yes, I am.
What does that involve?
Well, it started over in 2008. I travel to Africa quite often, especially East Africa. And we established a lot of linkages with churches out there, mainly in the rural areas. We're talking about very remote areas. No electricity, no running water. Things are really tough. But they live their lives. They don't need my sympathy. And they don't need anybody's sympathy. If you're going to give them anything, give them something practical. And so we were working in the villages, and there's a bunch of orphans. You see some young children, no shoes on their feet, completely unkempt. You think, well, what? And then I asked some questions from the groups of people that were there. Who are they? And they said, well, these are orphans.
Oh.
And I said, well, what's happening? Most of them were being cared for by church people who were just taking them in their homes. Some of them were like distant cousin. Both mom and dad had died for some reason. And they were just left. And so they took them in. So I gave them some money.
The concept of the village looking after the child, it didn't apply then?
It did in a way, but within the church context.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because if it weren't for that, they'd be just living wild on the street.
So what about the relatives? If the parents have died?
Sometimes the relatives don't really want to know. They've got a bunch of kids themselves.
Okay.
Yeah, and thankfully some of the children had links to the church in some capacity.
Okay.
Whether it's like a grandma, grandchild, and so help was given, and they were caring for the children out of their own pockets. They're poor themselves. No running water, remember, no electricity, no proper roads, so no infrastructure. They have 2, 3, 4, 5 kids themselves.
Wow.
And on top of that, they're looking after 1 or 2 children. Not asking for help from anyone, just get on with it, because there's no welfare as we would know it. And there's certainly no help from government. Government is Nairobi. It's around 8 hours on the road to where they are living. And even when you get to the town, you think another hour in from the town into the villages.
Wow.
Remote. The only time they'll see a politician is around election time. I mean, if their president died today, a lot of them won't know about it for weeks.
Wow.
No newspapers. You can imagine.
Really isolated.
Yeah. So I gave the pastors some money, just sort of response to see what I saw. So we keep sending money every year to look after
Okay.
the children, 20, 30, 40, whatever the number.
Mm-hmm.
And they would help. And 1 year, came back about 3 years after doing that, they gave me a piece of land.
Ooh, that was nice.
What do I do with a piece of land in the bushes?
Well,
So I said, what do you want me to do? We just want to give it to you out of appreciation.
mm-hmm.
Okay. And I said, well, what do you think we should do with the land? What about putting up a children's home, orphanage?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we did.
Oh, fantastic.
So we almost done. So if you want to send me some money, we're about 95% finished with the building. All they've got to do now is to redecorate it, kit it out in terms of,
Wow, that's
and then get the
fantastic.
staff in. So that's how it became. And as a result, when I saw how money was coming in,
Mm-hmm.
I had to then create some form of a charity to account for the money
Okay.
and Save Our Children Africa. In fact, it's bigger than that. It's got Save Our Children International, which takes in Africa, Caribbean,
Mm-hmm.
India even, and UK.
Wow.
And the strands do different things. The strands here, UK would be around parenting,
Mm-hmm.
rites of passage for young people. Whereas in Africa, it's about poverty relief
Okay.
and helping on the welfare side, similar to India. In Jamaica is something else. So it all depends. But the most developed of all of them is Africa, because that's where most of my time is being given to.
Okay.
Because of we've taken some through universities, some got married. These are the orphans.
Mm-hmm.
Some now, and we at any given time we support possibly about 20 to 50
Wow.
young. Because once they reach 18, we kind of pull away
Mm-hmm.
and we let them get on with life, as it were. Because there's always a bunch coming up.
Mm.
And it's not just orphans per se anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's children in need.
Wow.
A lot of the orphans came about because of the AIDS issue back
Oh,
in the 90s
okay.
and the early years, when it was still.
So they'd be
causing-
young adults now. Then?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. But and then as they become 18 also, 21 if they're in full-time medication.
Mm-hmm.
18 we try to end the physical financial support.
Okay.
But once they reach 21, we try to say goodbye.
Okay.
And they just get on with their lives. And then others are coming up.
Okay.
Who come in. So, I mean, Kenya has, last count, about 1 million street kids
Wow.
live on the streets across the country.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it breaks your heart.
Amazing, yeah. And I understand you've written some books. Can you just let us know the titles and where people can actually get them from? Because to go into the books would take too long, and I've got lots of questions to ask you. But I would like to know at least the titles and where people can get them from.
You can't get them from anywhere, I'm afraid,
Oh, really?
except from the church. Because I published them myself.
Okay.
I just wrote them, get a printer and print
That's
it.
a bit
And I
like-
print, print. I just couldn't afford to get it out. So it's a formal printer, print publisher. You could get them from the church. It all around Christians things. I mean, one we use for our programs is rites of passage, which is very important. So that's a program to help young people and families. I wrote it specifically to help parents to transition their children from being a child to becoming an adult.
Oh,
I mean, we all know about rites of passage, but a lot of them don't even know. They haven't got any life skills. They don't know about that.
Exactly.
When they find out, often it's painful or it's too late. So that's a manual which I use to deliver the program.
Okay.
The others are around Christian faith, doctrinal things,
Okay.
things to do with fasting, prayer, things to do with what it means to be a Christian. So many, I think I've written about a lot of them. Some of them are devotionals as well.
Mm-hmm.
Possibly about a dozen, 15 I've written.
Okay.
If you want a copy of any of them, you need to contact me at the church.
That's brilliant. At least we got that one out. So, what circumstances guided you to Luton?
Oh, that's a long time ago. That's 36 years ago. I mean, we came Luton really to establish the further extension of the ministry. We all began in London, and we felt, we need to.
Which part of London?
I'm from Hammersmith. I grew up in Hammersmith, which is West 6. I went to school in Fulham, which is just a few miles away from Hammersmith.
Mm-hmm.
The church where we began was in the Shepherd's Bush, then
Okay.
Harzen area. So we're talking about Northwest 10, West 12, West 12 being Shepherd's Bush. Then Northwest 10 of London is in the Brent, that area. Church is still there, the first church, as it were. And from there, we went out to share the gospel elsewhere.
Okay.
As we took
to
it,
Luton.
we brought me to Luton 35 years ago.
And what changes would you like to see in Luton to improve its image? I mean, people say, oh, that we only come in for cheap housing and there's deprivation and there's this and that. Number one, what changes would you like to see? And what would you say about Luton? What does Luton mean for you?
A great deal. I mean, as you heard before, you said I'm the chair of Luton Harmony. So it means a great deal to me. I think anywhere anyone lives, they should try their best to help, whether to help in terms of families or infrastructure. So I have a lot of affection for Luton, in as much that I get involved as much as I can. Education, police, as a preacher, in terms of that side of life, the spiritual side of life. I don't think a lot of the things that may be said of Luton is deserving, not because I live here, but because it's not true. And thankfully, that's changing. It's changing noticeably. So if you were to Google today, as people do about a town, Luton will still have examples of where people think it's not so great to live. But if you look at the time, most of it is many years ago, as opposed to postings today. And that's very, very good, because we've changed the image. It's still a poorish town, not poor as in abject poverty, but you have pockets of poverty, because people came years ago because of the work that was available, whether it's Vauxhall, as you know, and Whitbread and Electrolux and those, and they paid very good money at the time. And so over time, some of these businesses have disappeared or shrunk. And so to fill the space has not been easy. So lower paid jobs had to come up and to fill the space. A lot of it around the restaurants and the service industry. We don't pay a great deal of money. And so money is tight for some communities, and some areas are tight. But the town at the moment, through the council, has a great master plan, which I'd like to encourage them and to commend the council for, to eliminate poverty by 2040. So in 19 years, the aim is to get rid of poverty as we know it, which means the poorest of the poor won't have to remain poor. And obviously there are many elements that will bring that about. It's not just about having money, it's about poverty of mind. Absolutely. So I think the strands and the local authority, the council, are working hard to try and make it work so that it can deliver. Because some of the people that are in the council, they're doing fine, so they don't necessarily need to put themselves such a task. But it's great to think that they have got a vision enough that's so big and so impressive that they want to. If you don't get 100%, if you get 90%, you get 85%, but if you have no targets or no aspiration or no strategy, then things will never change. I love Luton because of that, because I've always enjoyed the mix, the cosmopolitan nature of the town. You can go from one end to the next. Within 10 minutes, you'll reach one end to the next. And not because it's tiny, because we haven't got traffic everywhere. I mean, we've got three junctions for the motorway system. We have our own airport. There are plans to do international to the Caribbean. Would you believe it?
Oh.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the COVID that's kind of slowed down some of the expansion plans, but they're developing the airport. And so therefore, I think it's got a lot to offer. It's got great train service, and the people get on. Just as an anecdote, well, not an anecdote, as a matter of fact, in 2003, Britain had riots from every corner. Birmingham, London, different parts of London, Bristol even. People just rioting because they're copying each other. And one of the only places in the country, Luton, never.
I thought they had one born in March 4?
Not in 2003. We're talking about going back before that.
Okay.
That's way back in the 80s.
Okay.
Yeah, that's way back in the 80s. But I don't want the recent one.
Okay.
But there have been nothing like that in Luton for a long, 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 long time.
And you mentioned you work with the police. What do you do with them?
We recruit some of their police officers.
Okay.
Yeah, because a few years ago, their numbers still poor, but was terrible then. The mix in terms of the community. Nearly everyone that were appointed were white male.
Mm-hmm.
And they keep saying, what can we do? What can we do to improve it? So they asked some of us, and we told them.
Mm-hmm.
And a few of the things we told them was, one, get some of us on the interview panel.
Mm-hmm.
No brainer, really.
Mm-hmm.
And they agreed. So I do interviews for them, along with others in the community. We also said, okay, well, why don't you open up, visit the areas that you're meant to be policing. So before you give your police officers the warrant card to say you're a police officer proper now, take them out and visit the town, visit the people. And so we receive them, we as a church, and I take them through, and we have a bunch, like maybe 20 of them, and we do a presentation. Because a lot of them who come in, they don't even know Luton. They're from outsiders. So whatever knowledge they have of Lutons is grapevine, Google, or whatever, misinformation. So if you come in into a town like Luton or in Bedford for that matter, and you have preconceived ideas about policing, and if you're a bit of a young hothead anyway, but happen to be a police officer, you can create all sorts of trouble, which is what happens. And, that's what happens so in a lot of police forces, because you think you've got the power and you can push your weight around, and it leads to problems. So we said, we will induct them, give them some form of induction into our town. So they come to the church with their trainers, and I'll give them a presentation for about an hour, on Caribbean culture, Caribbean life, why the church matters to Caribbean people, because it does, and so they have an idea that when they see a religious person in the Caribbean context or African context, give the respect that's due, not because I want it, but because our own people respect pastors and churches and so on and so forth, to give them an idea, as well as the fact that I always do a quiz with them, say, okay, how many countries are there in the Caribbean?
I ain't got a clue.
You haven't got a clue. Some people think Africa is a country. I mean, so that level of ignorance in a pathetic way, really, because you think you got to know a little bit more, but they don't know.
No, I think they don't even need any qualifications to become a police officer. They're actually trained for 2 years, don't they?
I mean, what they're now doing, the government, or it's been in the cards for a while, is that police will become degree only. You got to have a degree.
I think that's good.
Graduates. I mean, I think some police are resisting it. I think it's a great idea.
I think it's a great idea.
Because it's the same story with the nurses years ago. Right? If you remember, when nurses were seen as almost like assistant to the doctor. Menial, what you do? Oh, I'm a nurse. Well, what's that?
Yeah.
They didn't get the level of status that they should have, and they made them all graduates.
Wow.
They became graduates. They became nurses. Some of them run the place now. A lot of the hospitals are run by former nurses. In fact, some of them have surpassed doctors. Doctors remain in their specialism.
Yes.
But in terms of the administration of medicine, nurses.
So do you work with Montel Newville then?
I do.
Oh, okay, because I'm on the Stop and Set panel. So.
Yeah, he's part of Luton Army.
Yes.
Yeah,
is he also?
Yeah,
okay, so you work closely with him. So how did your childhood and adolescence years shape you into the dignified man you are?
Oh, wow. I mean, I was born in Jamaica. Came here, I was about 11 and a half. Didn't have any choice of school. The only school that I was sent to was the only school I went to. Those were the days when you had no choices. If your parents weren't in the know, whatever school the system sent you to, not that I was against the school, because I had no choice. But I found out quite soon, it was an all-boys school. I found out quite soon that it was one of the worst schools in the country.
Okay.
At the time, but we went there, did what we had to do. Thankfully, I did reasonably well. I became a Christian when I was still at school, you see, which kind of helped me no end, because it changed my life every which way. So by the time I left school with some A levels, and from that I was able to go on to university. But I didn't in the end. I gave it up. I didn't go. I got married instead.
Okay.
Yeah. So I stayed behind, and so really I'm a creature of the church in every which way. Obviously God, but in the church of the agency of the church, because all that I will come to appreciate and learn is because of the church. Not necessarily a church, but the church.
The church, okay. So how long? So you said you started. You was a Christian when you was at school. So what propelled that decision?
I was about 14. It's very hard to know when it was, but I was about 14-ish, because I'm trying to look back when I left and what happened before. I was about 14, and I was in Hammersmith with a bunch of friends about the Friday evening. About 4 or 5 of us from school, just hanging around talking about what we're going to be doing that weekend. And within a short while, police came nearby, the Hammersmith Broadway. And police came, drove in their van and said, listen, everybody move off. And we being who we were at the time, you got to tell us to move. So we were arguing with them. And then they said, no, you got to move because it's been reported there's a bomb in the cinema across the road.
Ooh.
And those are the days, sadly, of the IRA.
Okay.
But it was not uncommon. So it's not something you take lightly. Not then. Maybe now you might be a bit skeptical. So we all knew that it's possible. So we dashed away to see what was going to happen from a distance. And after about 5 minutes later, a car drew up. And the car had a certain person in the car. A friend of ours' mother came out in the car. She had just come from a prior meeting. But by this time, it must be about 10 in the evening. And she said, being motherly, and she recognized some of us anyway because of her son. And she invited us all to church that following Sunday. And at that age, no one thought about going to church.
1 second. So sorry about this. Delivery. Oh, thank you very much. That's what happens with live TV.
Of course, the real world.
The real world. Okay, sorry to have interrupted you.
Yeah, so she invited us all to church. None of us really wanted to go, not because we're anti-church, because I went to Sunday school all my life from a child growing up. I came to this country, so it was not an issue, but it was nothing I was going to commit to. But one of my friends took her up on it, for whatever reason. I don't know what was going on in his mind, his heart. He gave her his word. Yes, I'll come. But then he looked across the rest of us to see we would join him. But nobody said anything because we weren't prepared to go. And out of sympathy for his position, I said, I'll come with you. Yeah, of course. I wasn't doing anything this Sunday. I wasn't intending to go again. So we agreed to turn up in the church. Small little place. We went to the Sunday. So we went together. We went to the service. It finished. We both went away. He never went again once.
Wow.
And I've never stopped going.
That's amazing. So how long have you been a
40
pastor?
years. Oh, as a pastor, over 30. And as 50 odd years now, because I'm in my 60s now, and I was only about 14 at the time. So it's a long time.
So you started going to church. So what made you think, oh, I want to be a pastor?
Oh, no, it doesn't happen that way. No, you're a Christian. You live your life as a Christian. I have plans to go to university. And whatever life is, whether it's a career, but then within the church context, we are on the Pentecostal, and with the Pentecostal tradition, we encourage people to be participative in the service. So even though we have a preacher, we have singers, choirs, and everything else, the congregation are encouraged to say something, what we call give a testimony, and the testimony could be about that day's stuff, or what God has done for you, and beyond that, sometimes might be encouraged to give what we call an exhortation, which is like a 1-2 minute encouragement from the scriptures. So we all do that. It's part of the traditional way Pentecostal operates. So a portion of the service is open for anyone to stand up, to say something, even to sing a song. You don't have to be in the choir. some of the voices are terrible, but they still want to sing because they want to express themselves to God, and they want to be a blessing to the congregation. And so it's not about the quality of the voice or good you are at speaking. It's about exercising your faith. And part of that is to say, listen, I'm going to share something. I've been reading this particular portion of scripture, and I'd like to tell you what I think about it, what's done for me. Because you think there may be others that could benefit from what you have been blessed by.
So that directed you into...
And so as you do so, more and more, some people end up doing it better than others. You didn't realize you can do it until you do it.
Oh,
so your own abilities begin to emerge.
Okay.
And people notice it. You don't even notice it. All you're doing is trying to participate.
Okay.
Because I was a very shy kid. Very, very shy. So to do that was like another world to me.
Okay.
But once I started to do it, I got more confident, less shy. And I was never intending, because I was planning to go to university. I wanted to be a professor by the time I was 30. That was all my plans.
Wow.
To be a university bud. Because I got tuned into knowledge, study everything, economics, politics, philosophy, whatever. That was my way of, that's going to be my contribution. But I gave it up when I got married, gave it up instead of, married instead of going to university, because I couldn't do both. In those days, it was too difficult. So once I stayed behind, as it were, and I just started to live my life, got myself a job. Family started to come along. And then after a while, the little ability that I may have had to speak in a context of a service, people start to notice it. So once they notice it, you then become a target.
Okay.
So if no one is asked, you're asked, because they think you have something to say. They think, especially being a young person, older folks love to hear the young, because they think, it's a good way of staying strong, but also they love to hear younger people. They must be doing something good if you are doing well as well as you are. And so it was very encouraging. And plus, I think we attract other young people into the church. So over time, you then get called upon more and more. And the more you get called upon more and more, is the more you take it more seriously.
Okay.
And that's why these things are very, very important. I remember when I was in school, and I didn't care for studies, because it was about playing, it's about messing about, all boys school, rough, really difficult school. And therefore, you didn't take it, to study, to walk around with books. It's not the done thing. So even if you were bright, you hide it, because it's better to be good at sports and other things than that. And so in that kind of a world, you didn't really want to show up that you're scholarly. So in the end, I would begin to speak, and people said, "Okay, you got something." And one thing led to another, and I was appointed to youth ministry in some form, like an assistant youth leader. So you got a bit of responsibility, and then I got promoted over the years became a pastor, senior minister, etc., etc. But it comes. We don't.
When you say you got promoted, do you have to study to be a pastor?
Not formally. There's no. You can go to a school and become a pastor that way, but our tradition doesn't work that way. Not that our tradition is necessarily perfectly right, but that's the way we do it.
Okay.
It doesn't mean we devalue study, by no means, because the things that most Pentecostal pastors they're quite good at the Word of God, the Bible. They know the Scriptures, and clearly that's our starting point. But we don't go to a institution. Not that we're against it, but we don't go to an institution and say, "Okay, I'm going to be a clergy man or woman, so therefore I'm going to study theology, divinity." No, you can, but because you study, it doesn't make you a pastor.
Yeah, or a better pastor.
Or a better pastor.
Yeah, okay.
Because to be the pastor it's not just about knowing some stuff. A lot of people did teaching, never became teachers, or they became teachers and they're terrible at it.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah. So being a pastor is a calling, really, to be perfectly honest, and that emerges out of you Others obviously play a huge part because you got overseers, you got leaders that are leading the church. So you can't make yourself a pastor. Some people may try today because of the sense of, well, I can do my own thing. But if you're going to be biblical, you don't do your own thing. You think of even the great Apostle Paul. He didn't become, of his own making. No, he was accountable to Peter and the others that were around before him. Although he had a call by God, he still needed for it to be validated by others.
Oh my goodness! And I always turn off my phone. Sorry, I'm going to turn it off right now.
It's all right.
You know, I'm interviewing. I'll speak to you later. Okay. Shouldn't have any more interruptions now.
We should. It's all right.
Okay.
That's
Sorry
why I
about
was
that.
live, you see.
Yeah.
Because I know these things can happen as live.
Okay. So that's very interesting. What I wanted to know is, how did you come across the premises in Berry Park?
Oh, we've been looking. We were looking for quite a while. Where we were hiring.
Oh, sorry. Did you finish what you were saying? Because I interrupted.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I'd have to go back to find out where I was.
Okay.
But I think we could move it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean that the premises where we were looking for a while. The Bible says, "If you seek, you'll find." So we were looking, and we tried to, buy one or two things before. It never really worked out. But in the end, we were landed with this one, and it was a divine guidance, to be honest, because when we bought it, it wasn't in the market proper, and we were able to buy it before others became aware of it. If we were in for a bidding war, we would not have been able to keep up with all the offers that potentially would have trumped our offer. So we were able to buy it. We've been there 22 years.
Wow, that's a long time.
Yeah, we're in the spot.
Okay, and what has been the biggest challenge you've faced being a pastor?
It's always people. It's not a person, it's people. Because people are people. You got wonderful people, and you got people that can be difficult, awkward. Because we all come from a different place. Some families produce brilliant children, and some families produce monsters. You may have two monsters of a parent, and the children turn out to be wonderful. You may have one person that turns out really well, and their siblings are all over the place. People. And because you never know who you have, we have to be open to everyone. And when everyone comes in, that's when you see what you have. And so the challenge of people, not because people are troublesome, because thankfully I don't have troublesome people in the church. But what I mean by people is people come with their life struggles, whether it's sickness, whether it's poverty, whether it's difficulty of forgiving someone else, whether it's marital, whether it's racism, whether it's discrimination of another kind. People. Some people get they can be awkward, prideful, but then again, you got compensation by the others who are wonderful people.
So how do you overcome those challenges with the people?
You never overcome because you may, because people they change. I mean, like we have a baptism on Sunday. We're baptizing someone that is relatively new to the group.
Okay.
And we'll see what happens with that one person. And she's wonderful. Otherwise, we wouldn't be we wouldn't be baptizing her because we wouldn't think she's a Christian. Because we only baptize people that are saved, who've made a conscious decision to follow Christ. And therefore, we were looking for them living that life as a Christian. So we're not expected to be baptizing people that are still steeped in sin and trouble. Yeah. So, but you never know because the struggles of life brings out the good, sometimes brings out some bad, and one has to deal with it. You say, how does I deal with it? We deal with it through the word. We've got to teach the word of God, preach the word of God, which is bigger than all of us. I mean, as a pastor, I have to be more even diligent about the word than even the listener, because he who speaks and tell others If you're not doing it yourself, then you're really not only a hypocrite, you're worse than that. So it's a challenge for me. Secondly, prayer. Prayer helps because prayer is the support in network. And ultimately, the church doesn't belong to me. I often say to the folks, I haven't got any personal, It is not my enterprise. It's not my church. So I will never take on the burden. It's not like I'm running a business and I've got to do everything. No, it's not a business in that respect. So therefore, I can't. So any problems I have, God is your church after all. You take care of it. And he does.
So do you think prayer is like counselling?
No.
It's not.
Prayer is communication. Communicating with God. It's a two-way dialogue. We talk to God and God talks back to us. Some people say, how does that work? It's hard to explain, but it's certainly a dialogue because God talks back to us in a myriad of ways. Dreams, visions, the Bible itself, the Word of God. And sometimes he talks to us in the Spirit. He said, people who don't necessarily understand this, I don't expect you to understand it. But it's real. And as Jesus once said to a man called Nicodemus, you must be born again for you to see the kingdom. You must be born again.
So when you're praying for these troublesome people, these people who have challenges, so it's actually the prayer that transforms. Is that what you're saying? Because I was trying to think how you overcome the challenge of these people who...
No, you need to pray for your own strength. For you,
to handle them. I see. Okay.
But also pray for their trouble.
Okay.
Their situation.
Okay.
Because God is a helper.
Okay.
If he doesn't help, well, why bother?
Okay.
Yeah, God helps us. He helps you, the person. Helps them. Every which way he provides help. Peter says, cast your cares on him. I mean, you think, you have a legal case, right? You're up all night with it because you don't know what to do. Then someone tell you, there's a great lawyer up the road. You go and see the lawyer and the case over. It wouldn't be wise to go back home and say, well, I wonder what's going to happen now. No, you leave the case to the lawyer.
Okay.
That's what you're paying for.
Yes.
Or if you have a serious other problem, a heating problem, you can't fix it yourself. You call the plumber, you call the heating engineer. You leave it to the person. You leave it to God.
Okay, I get
That's what prayer, you leave it with God. You're taking the case and passing it on.
Okay, so another question. People have stereotypes of pastors. Which stereotype would you like to negate?
That we're all hypocrites. But it goes beyond hypocrisy. It goes beyond hypocrisy. Hypocrisy, not only pastors, but Christians, is never true. And they know it's not true. It's a sweeping, silly statement. So that's one. Second one, that we're in it for the money. No. I used to be a senior executive for years. I was one level below a chief executive. And I gave it all up for not a penny as a salary from the church. And I still don't draw a salary from the church. So we're not in it for the money.
Okay. Thank you very much for that clarification. And you've written a blog about the mark of the beast. The last days will end when the gospel has preached into the world for witness. Very briefly, what does that mean?
Okay. I wrote this some time ago.
It's 2020.
Okay.
April.
My last one, I think.
Okay.
The mark of the beast, I wrote it really in response to some of the things that were being put out about the mark of the beast, because they get the term from the book of Revelation, and people who don't know the Bible, or not even Christians, but they pick up a particular buzzword, or someone spooked them over something, and it becomes an issue. And some of them become experts overnight, and things of that type. So that blog really was to try and correct some of the silly conspiracy theories that were going around, but also to bring people back to the scripture. And I don't know what precisely the context of what that statement you read. I'd have to remind myself. Over a year ago I wrote it. But in short, what I was basically trying to say is, the mark of the beast, don't see it as, because it talks about 666 and things of that kind. And people thinking, well, maybe the vaccine is to do with it. I said, let's just calm down for a while. Because even if someone were to put 666 on my forehead, literally speaking, or in my hand, literally speaking, that would necessarily affect my faith in God. Because, it's like putting a tattoo on you. I mean, I don't approve of tattoos, but it wouldn't affect you as a person, other than people thinking, what you did that for. So what I was trying to say, what really matters is living for God. Because there are things that we don't know. I don't know what's in your special dish. You cook me a wonderful dish. I mean, it's so great. I talk about it for the rest of my life. I don't need to know what's in it to enjoy it. And there's many things we don't know. But what matters most is live the life that whatever God intends doing, you'll be part of his plans and not just be left to one side. I remember I was traveling back from Jamaica some years ago with a member of my family. And, you get your usual rules, boarding pass, the lot. He decides he wants to go and have breakfast. I said, well, listen, I don't, let's just go on the plane. No, he wants to have his breakfast. So I said, all right, you go, I'll hang around. Because I don't like to mess around. I know I don't have a second chance. You miss the flight, you miss the flight. Anyway, he went away and had his breakfast. And while he's having his breakfast, they all call us to board the flight. And you can guess the rest. I'm on the plane, he's still not there. In the end, he got left behind.
Oh, no.
Everything was right. He had his passport, he had his ticket, he had his boarding pass, but he wasn't ready. Because he was distracted because he felt he needed to have breakfast. I said, no, you do it, I'll stay in here. And that's what happens sometimes. People play around and miss the moment.
Yeah, I strongly believe that. I believe in taking advantage of now. And last question I wanted to ask you. We're told about the rising cases of Omicron and, people are kind of concerned. What kind of words of wisdom would you give people just to kind of ease that kind of anxiety? Basically.
We must just just pause for a second. I don't think the government has been really clever in some of these things, but I won't knock them in this conversation. But what I want to say is this. It's a virus. The AIDS issue is a virus. It's called a virus. The virus is about everything, literally. There's cold virus, flu virus. I mean, virus is a virus. Now that it's here, it's not going to go away. The flu virus hasn't gone away. It's here. The cold hasn't gone away. It's here. What we're going to do is live in a way to live with it. It will mean people will die, will get sick. All we can do is hope that people's immune system will be strong enough, improve well enough that they can cope. Now, some vaccination and some medicine will help. Medicine has its problem. If you keep yourself healthy and well, you should be fine. But even then, you may have problems if you have a particular problem. 5 of us go to a dinner and one person get food poisoning. Why? We all get the same food. Someone's an allergic reaction to some peanuts or maybe to the milk or something else because we're not all the same.
Right.
And so what I would simply say to people is just stay calm, use common sense, listen to the advice of government as best as you can, follow it, and be aware that you can remain safe. But at the same time, you must be careful not to be blasé about your health. Because if you're blasé about your health, you could find yourself in serious trouble. So just be wise. We are asked to be wise about many things. We were told years ago, smoking didn't kill you. No one would say that today.
Yeah.
No one in there, and yet people knew it would kill you. But it wasn't something that they wanted to advertise or even let anyone know about. Governments knew that, but the taxes are coming in, the money was coming in. And that's how so one has to take full responsibility for themselves, not ignoring advice, because we all need, that's why we have teachers in school. That's why we have officials in life, where you should park, where you should not park, whatever. You can't just open up a restaurant and start cooking. There are rules to say what standards you must have. So we all appreciate that's necessary. But on top of that, you still have to be sensible and take good counsel, good advice, and act where you should.
Thank you very much. And this was Pastor Denny. I hope you enjoyed it. Bye-bye.